Hi, I'm Lori Novak, and this is going to be a recording of the presentation I gave to your camera club last week. If you find that you have any questions or whatever, feel free to email me at lori@lorinovak.com. And I'm just going to get started here. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go here and we'll share that, and then we'll hit play, and we'll start doing this. I get myself situated here with what I can see and can't see. I'm going to talk today about seeing art in architecture. Something that I'm kind of passionate about is finding unique compositions, finding things that people walk by and don't notice. A lot of us are super tuned into things because we're photographers, so we're always looking and noticing things that most people don't. But even amongst us, amongst ourselves, I notice sometimes when I'm out with friends and that we get caught up in only seeing certain things and not paying attention to whatever else is going on around us. So with that, I'm going to or not I'm going to I can't forward my screen. Hold on, sorry. All right, I don't know what I did, but it worked. This is a little bit about who I am. I'm a creative. I've always been creative. I took ballet when I was younger for quite a few years. I taught ballet. I created dances. I choreographed. Um, I took art classes in high school, drawing, painting, pottery, the whole deal. I can't do any of it anymore because I don't practice any of it. Um, I'm a traveler. I've always loved to travel. I love going new places and exploring. I grew up, my parents, we went camping every weekend. Our family vacations were spent somewhere different every year, and we drove to where we were going. So we saw all kinds of things along the way. We got to stop, and just experience things other than our own home. Excuse me. An educator. I've been writing for photofocus.com for 6 years. I teach online sometimes. I have courses that I can share. I'm hoping to record some more. I'm a mentor. I help people when they ask, and not always when they ask, but I have mentoring available on my website, one-on-one. A very curious person. I always joke kind of that I should have been an engineer because I always want to know how something works, why it works, what makes it work the way it does. And I think that being curious really informs my photography and helps me see beyond the actual, like what's in front of me. I'm a wanderer. I enjoy just wandering with my camera or without, and seeing what I can find. I don't always have a plan when I go out with my camera. I am told that I'm inspiring and that my images are inspiring. My photography is inspiring. I don't know why. I just have been told that, and I'm starting to believe it. Maybe not as much as I should, but it's something that I enjoy being. I love to inspire people in their own creative paths. I'm unique. I have a unique way of looking at the world and at life, which I also believes informs my work and my way of looking at how I shoot things. I don't always go with what's trendy. I don't go with whatever the popular thing is to do right now. I am encouraging. I said before, I really enjoy helping other people and encouraging them along their own paths. I'm uber observant to a fault at times. I see things that people just don't see. I make my husband crazy because I see little things like the water drop on the counter in the bathroom or in the kitchen that has to be cleaned up. So there's a little, I don't know what's going on there. But again, it helps me in my photography because I can find things to photograph that other people walk by or don't even notice. I'm very laid back and approachable. I'm just me, very down to earth. And and I kind of just enjoy life, and I hope that comes through in how I present this to you today too. I found this quote a couple months ago, and I felt it, like it spoke to me. It's what I do. Um it's what I'm about, really. It's from Sherlock Holmes, and everybody sees, right? We all see, but you can train yourself to notice what you see, to pay attention to what you're looking at and see what's in your frame. So you can train yourself to do that. And I really believe that you can be taught that as well. I'm going to get this out of the way. This is the least favorite part of photography to me is the technical stuff, the gear. I'm not a gear person. I don't have a ton of gear. I don't buy the latest and greatest. My Canon 6D is 10 years old. I happen to have two of them because one had to be repaired and I got a deal on a second one, which I use as a backup. Because when you're traveling, it's good to have two bodies. I rented one for a major trip one on a trip that I went on, and my camera had issues. Thankfully, I had a second body, and it's because of that trip and because my camera had to be repaired that I ended up with two bodies now. One sits in my cupboard a lot, but it's there if I need it. Same with lenses. I don't have the latest and greatest. And prior to 2019, it had been 10 years since I bought a new lens. The EF 17 to 40 is the wide angle. I just had that repaired. It's 10 years old, but it's an amazing lens and I love it for my wide shots. The Tamron I just bought in 2019, that was a total impulse buy. My Canon 70 to 300 that I had was 10 years old. It was fine, honestly. I went to a trade show, had somebody hand me the 100 to 400 Tamron. I was like, wow, this is a lot lighter than my lens for such a big lens. And I love it. And I shoot with that lens 90 to 95% of the time. I take a lot of detail shots. So um, I have a 50 millimeter lens, which probably should just be sold, given away or something, because it never sees the light of day unless I take it out because I feel sorry for it. Come on, let's go. Let's see what we can find with you. That's how that goes. And the macro 100 millimeter I take out too. I actually recently took only that lens into the city with me, into Chicago. And it really forced me to find different compositions with my work because there was no zooming. There was no wide angle. This is it. You get what you get within this frame. Is a really good exercise. So I shoot macro from time to time as well with it. Then most of my post processing is done in Lightroom. I do a little bit of Photoshop stuff, but that's basically just to remove things that I can't remove very well in Lightroom. Everything's getting better and better though. So a lot of what you couldn't used to do in Lightroom, you can now. The masking that they have put in there now is amazing. I use Luminar Neo kind of to play with. I like to just go in there and see what presets they have and what they look like and then kind of go from there. The one feature that I love about Luminar Neo is that it removes power lines fairly well, which is fantastic because I don't like to do it in Photoshop. And Lightroom does okay. Again, it's getting better, but the DxO Nick collection, I guess they just came out with a newer version again with some updates, but I mostly use Silver FX Pro for my black and white conversions. It's a beautiful black and white program, and a lot of people use that for their black and white images. Then when I'm feeling artsy, I have Topaz Labs Texture Effects, which they no longer even support, but I still have it. It still works, and I like to play around when I'm feeling artsy. It does layers and textures and to me, it makes it easier than trying to do stuff like that in Photoshop. Again, I'm not doing a bunch of quotes for you, but there are a few throughout that work with how I feel about photography and my art and trying to get others to learn this. Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. So this is about seeing art in architecture, right? So it's what you are seeing, definitely, but what you're presenting from your point of view and your opinion with all of your life experience goes into that image. And that's what you're showing your viewers. That's what the people looking at your photographs see. So, you want to make sure you're being able to convey the emotions of what you're seeing, whether it's architecture or landscape or whatever it is. But you want to make others see what you see as well. Art and architecture are all around us. All you have to do is look for it. It's really not that hard to find, in my opinion. Um, I think that we get caught up in the big picture and we get caught up in the usual shot that you see, um, especially if you travel, like if you go to a new place, right? Oh, I've never been here before, and you just want to shoot all the things. It's very easy to get caught up in that, but it's everywhere. Art and architecture too. Nature has tons of architecture in it, and I'm pretty sure that's where our architecture comes from, and all those ideas that people have and still have come from nature to begin with. If you look at things, the Fibonacci spiral is everywhere. There's art in nature and architecture, the lines and the shapes of things. Um, but hopefully the next time you head out looking for art and architecture, this whole presentation helps you. Some things that do help are doing some research. If you're going to a certain place, so when I went down to Bloomington, I looked first to see what kind of architecture was there, if there was anything famous, because there's something famous in almost every town. Maybe not the tiniest farm community or something, but even some of those have some amazing Louis Sullivan jewel box banks are in some obscure small towns. So you never know. There's a beautiful Art Deco theater in Normal. It's some So if you go somewhere, do some research. If you already know where you're going and which buildings you want to shoot, or which sculptures or whatever it is, research it. Find out why the person built it, what their thought process was behind it. It helps you look at the building in a different way with different eyes because you know their purpose, you know why they did what they did. And it helps you compose images that can convey that story, the story of the architect and the story of the building. I struggle with this myself still because, a building is a building, right? I took a storytelling course a couple of months ago, and after the first week, I was already thinking differently about all of this. Like, you're telling the story of that building. There's history there. There's the story of the architect who built it. There's the story of the materials that it's created with. So there's a story always there. We just have to find it and know what it is that we're trying to bring out to tell that story. Again, whether it's architecture or pretty much any genre, a lot of what I'm going to talk about here applies to all of that. So just examples, different ways to look at things. This is the Milwaukee Art Museum, pieces of it, parts of it. Just look for different perspectives of ways to find this. This is an architect, Jeannie Gang, who has now two or at least two other buildings in Chicago. This is actually considered a pavilion. They have weddings here, and tons of people do graduation pictures, all kinds of pictures here. But art, it's everywhere. This is a pavilion. It's a piece of art. It's not just a pavilion. It's the way it's done. It's a sculpture, basically. And it can be as simple as a parking garage drive, right? This is the drive going up to the top of Mamona Terrace, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright property on one of the lakes up in Madison. It's a very simple composition, but it's still artistic. It's still famous architecture. It doesn't have to be some grand modern building either. One of the things that I love to do when I'm out with other people and I'm trying to help people learn this, it's a process and you have to get used to doing things differently. Get to where you're going and put your camera down and walk around first. Notice where the light's coming from. Notice details. Notice what's when you look up, or the view from where you are, or how you can incorporate the view into the architectural image. There's all kinds of things that we don't particularly notice when we have our cameras up to our faces. So take the time to put your camera down and be in the place that you are. What else is going on? What do you see? What catches your eye first before you start taking photos? In this case, I was wandering around and this was on the other side, and looking up, there was these amazing shapes. The details in this building are beautiful. And because it was a bright blue sky, it worked in black and white to do this and make the sky black like that. again, if I hadn't wandered around first, I wouldn't have known. And I might not have had the time to get here, to get to this point of the building, because we only had a short amount of time here. So by doing a quick, checking it out first, I knew where I could go back to. Um, Same with this. This is, if you notice in the big shot, right? This is the large photo, that one side is all shaded. The I don't have my cursor lit up. The right side of the Griffith Observatory is in the shade, but the left side is not. And that staircase is interesting to me. So go where the light is. Look for where the lights and shadows are and the shapes. This fits into all of those categories. Um, but and always look up. There could be amazing gargoyles. There could be all kinds of, like, the details on this building, the etching images that are, or, the shapes that are etched and cut into the stone. Other things to do are sign up for tours while you're traveling, and get a better idea, overall look of where there is to shoot and what there is to photograph. Another thing, and I talked about stories before, and storytelling is a big part of what photographers do, right? We tell the story of our subject. One way in architecture to tell stories of buildings is by telling the whole entire story. So first we're going to tell the big picture, right? This is the big building. This is the whole building. This is what it looks like. So you're going to, this is actually, again, by Jeannie Gang, the architect who did that pavilion. This is St. Regis Residencies in Chicago. So this is telling the whole story. It's not completely the whole story. I don't have the bottom part, and it has a different look from another side, from another direction. Tell the whole story of where the building is. This architecture along the Chicago River Walk, one of the bridges. It gives you a sense of place and where you are. But it's the big picture. This is a huge big picture. This reminds me of the Grand Canyon. Like, I felt like I couldn't get it all. This is the Olympic Stadium in Munich, and it's a 10 image vertical pano. I think there's some pieces missing off the sides here, but you couldn't get it all, right? So I did a handheld 10 image, or however many images I took to put together as a pano. It's the big picture. It's what I felt when I walked in. As soon as you walk in, you're like, whoa, this is crazy. I had no idea that this looked like this. I mean, I've probably seen photos or movies or whatever, but I didn't, when you walk in there, you get this huge feeling of that. So take all the big shots, the big pictures, then come in a little closer, go mid-range. So either zoom in or move your feet, walk closer, whatever it takes to get a little bit closer. The building on the left in this image is the St. Regis that I showed you in that first picture. And I'm going to show you all three things together in a minute. The building on the right with those curved balconies is also the same architect, Jeannie Gang. That's the Aqua building in Chicago. I was wandering, I don't even remember who I was with or what I was doing, but I looked up and I saw these two buildings, together. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool, because they're both by the same architect. And they're not necessarily close. Obviously, zoom compresses the distance. And I just thought it was really cool that you could have these two buildings be in the same image like this and create a composition that way. It's just a unique, and it's another part of the building story. Here's a mid-range shot from Cannes or somewhere one of the towns in the south of France. And this to me was all about the color and the texture and the character that's here. And yes, the details in a place like this are incredible, but you also want to show more than that, right? You want to show a little bit more. What else is going on? What does everyday life look like? But downgrade that a little bit, right? Everyday life looks like this, but bring it in and show pieces of the larger picture, a middle range image. Then go even closer, right? Zoom in, get up close, whatever it takes. This is at the stadium. Oh no, this is still a mid-range shot. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Um, I was looking the other day at this shot and I'm like, where is this in the stadium? And in that huge image, it's hard to find this little area. So you're still telling a different part of the story of the stadium, whether it's the broadcast booths or sky boxes or whatever they're called. It's another piece of what goes on in this huge stadium and another piece of what this building looks like, what the architecture looks like. So just you know, bite it down a little bit, tell a little bit more of the story. Now we're going to go even closer, right? We're going to go into the details of the building. And we're going to get shapes and lines and light and shadows, and we're going to show what it looks like at different times of day, or this helps you tell this part of the story. When you look at that bigger image of it, you'll be like, okay, I see how this goes and how this part makes the whole building the shape that it is. This is another example of getting really close. This is me standing right next to the building. And this is a design by Louis Sullivan, who has amazing work in Chicago and elsewhere. His stuff is very detailed, as you can see. This is something that I think that people miss. Here, this is in a place that I'm sure thousands of people walk by every day on Michigan Avenue in the city. It's beautiful, but you have to take the time to find it and see it, though. But this is telling a smaller piece of the story. This is the smallest piece, not the smallest, but a smaller chunk of the Olympic Stadium story. I found these chairs fascinating. The different shades of green, the way the light was on the top rim of the chair, the shapes that they made, and the fact that you're not really sure what they are. And if you don't know what they are, you might not be able to figure it out, which I absolutely love to do with my photography. Um, make it hard, make somebody want to spend some time in your image. What is this? What are they taking a photo of, and why are they taking that? What is that? So make somebody think about it. But this is just another piece of the story of the stadium. So again, this is the big picture, is the St. Regis on the left, almost the whole building. Then we scrunch down a little bit, right? And we zoom in, or we get closer somehow, and we take a middle range section. And then we go even closer and take a closer picture. So these work together to tell the entire story of the building. Maybe not entire story. You could do all kinds of things with this to tell the entire story. But it's just an example of spending time somewhere and telling the big picture and zooming in and getting even closer, so that when you share images, when you come back from a trip or your travels, or even if you're out for a day somewhere, you can share the images, you can share the story of what it is you were photographing. Angles and perspectives. This is another thing. They can make or break images, right? When you're wandering around, look at the building from as many different ways as you can. And this applies no matter what you're photographing. If you're photographing a flower, photograph it from underneath, above, sides, all over. And you just get unique images that way. It pushes you to see beyond the typical shot. This image was from up in the Marina Towers, Marina City in Chicago. If you're lucky enough to get access, you might see this view. The majority of people out in the world don't get to see this view. So I'm happy to be able to show it to you. It's not something everybody gets to see. I hung my camera out over the edge. I put my camera on auto because I don't have a articulating screen. I can't see what's going on. I aim it down and I shoot. And I look at it to see where it's composed, if it's composed like I want it or how I want it. If it looks okay, I take a couple more and adjust. But you can't get that shot without doing something like that. So it's perspectives. Look for different angles, different ways to photograph the same thing. This is something I do a lot. I end up with my camera on the side of a building. I mean, like this, right? Up against, looking up. And I'm doing this. most of the time I'm doing this. Sometimes I'm shooting blind and put it on auto and put the camera up against the building. Um, because you're looking in a direction that most people don't look. So they don't see that perspective normally. You're showing them something different. This has the added depth and layers because of the reflection as well. Now I'm talking about reflections later. Again, the Weissman Art Museum by Frank Gehry in Minneapolis. Camera up against the side of the building, shooting straight up. And with his buildings, the number of compositions are probably infinite because his stuff is so unique. And so if you're into any geometrical shapes in buildings, it's a interesting work that he does. But put my camera up against the side of the building and look up. Move it even, don't just look straight up, but look sideways up. What's this way? What happens if I push my camera this way? What's over there? This is obviously, well, maybe not obviously, another looking up shot. I guess it's obvious if you know that's the sun making that bright light behind there. This is at the Getty Center in Los Angeles. Again, we had very limited time here. I think a half hour, 40 minutes, maybe an hour. And talk about walking around to find things. It's hard when you have limited time. So I knew of a couple of places because, again, go online, look at other photos, see what's there before you go. So I knew there was a curvy white parts of the building that I wanted to photograph. That I knew ahead of time. I had no idea this existed. Wandering around. I wander in this space that I don't know how to describe it because it was kind of like an overhang, but not like it didn't seem to serve purpose other than just being structure. But I went underneath and instead of just walking through, I looked straight up and this is what I saw. And if I had just walked through and not looked up, I wouldn't have gotten this image, which is very Escher-esque, very, kind of like illusional. What is this? And what's up and what's down? And, makes people kind of scratch their heads and go, what? I don't know what's going on here, but it's kind of cool. So change your angles, change your perspective. You can also do that by using, like I said before, I went into the city with only my 100mm lens. I've photographed Union Station a lot, never with my 100mm lens. And this is one of the images that I got. Typically you find the sign shot from straight on and in the front of the building with the pillars. There's big pillars. I have an image of that later. This is different. Having that 100mm only view really forced me to find different angles and different perspectives to create images with. Again, looking up. This is the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. How many people go here and visit and don't look up here and see all those amazing detailed insignias or whatever they are, and even the tops of the columns, the flourishes and the design. It's somewhere that I think that just people don't think about. There's probably, they don't even think about it, so they don't. They just walk through and look at the gate and go, okay, ooh, this is awesome, and it's beautiful, right? It's especially in the morning when the sun's coming up. It's a beautiful place to photograph, but look around, look for different angles, different ways of seeing whatever it is in front of you. Up, down. Always remember to look behind you as well, because you never know what's going on back there. The sun could have been such a way this particular day that the shadows were amazing. You gotta look everywhere. Reflections is another thing that I incorporate into my photography quite often. I went on a photo tour workshop with a guy who from Chicago years ago, and he did his homework beforehand, and he gets to talk to you when you're heading out, and he said about my work, he was like, you love reflections. And I looked at him, I'm like, I do not. But as the day went on, I started realizing how much I'm drawn to them. It's kind of crazy. But then of course it's like when you buy a new car, you think you're buying the only blue whatever it is in the land, and then as soon as you buy that car and you start driving it, you see one every day drive down your street or whatever. It's like when you're looking for them, you find them. So reflections can add layers and depth and textures to an otherwise uninteresting shot. This is the Rookery building in Chicago again, and this is someplace you should definitely go inside the atrium because it's incredible. Um, the marble added this other color to it and in texture looking. Um, Again, I'm looking up straight up. I want to make sure that the buildings that were reflected in the column were in the shot as well. So it's just another way of creating another uh, perspective, another point of view, different way to look at something. Same as this. This is, I was out with 4 or 5, 6 other photographers, whatever it was, and it was winter. This is ice on the Chicago River. Everybody's focusing on the bridges and the buildings and the river, like big shots, right? Wide angles, the lights, this. And I'm like, great, I love all that stuff too, but how else can I shoot this? What else can I do that will make this a different and unique image? There's got to be a different way. I don't want to come home from an outing with the same photos as everybody else. And I work hard to not do that. To the point that I don't take photos sometimes when I'm out with other people because I just can't do that. It's not what I want to do. Here, the reflection in the water of the architecture, I still find this architectural. Nature's architect, the ice is very architectural and the shapes that it makes in between the spaces as well. I shot this with, at the time I had a 70 to 300 and I just kept zooming in on places on the river. I have a series of these now that made interesting compositions. What's in my frame? What works? And what can I do that still shows this is a place of where it is and still be architectural? These kind of reflections are everywhere. And this is probably something that once you see, you won't stop seeing. If you're in a city that has all these glass buildings and windows and they're amazing and they're mirror like, and they create, you think they're flat, but when you look at the reflections, you realize that they're not flat because they create these wavy lines. And it made me think about a waterfall, the way it came down the side of that building, which is interesting because this is I don't even know what it's called anymore. It used to be called Northwest Station. But the front of the Northwest Station building is in the shape of a waterfall. It's blue and it comes down in 3 tiers that are like this. So it kind of just all fit together. You wouldn't, if you don't know Chicago, you wouldn't know what building this is necessarily, but it creates an interesting graphic. So the reflections, same thing. This is across the river from where I was. Those silver kind of V's or W's towards the bottom of that bluish building are from the building behind me when I'm standing to photograph this. Again, they create interesting shapes all the way up the windows. It creates interesting shapes. And in this particular shot, there's 3 flags in this image that kind of take a while to find if you don't realize that they're there. You can kind of see the poles if you look at the bottom, but they're a little bit hidden within the lines of the building. It's just something unique, a little bit different than what you might normally shoot when you're in a city or photographing architecture or buildings. Same thing, right? Clouds are amazing and make amazing reflections. And this scene, you could probably stand here for an hour and get umpteen different images. There might be more blue in the sky or less blue, different color. It's just going to change with the daylight and with how many clouds are there or not there. But it creates a unique image. It becomes almost an illusion of some sort. But reflections are a great way to, like I said, add depth, add interest, add texture, layers. It just adds another level of interest to an image. This is something else I do a lot. I put my camera on the ground. I don't necessarily get down on the ground myself anymore, not in public, as I don't get up very easily. And nobody wants to watch that. So I put my camera on the ground. Again, I'm going to put it on auto unless I have a good idea of what's happening. And then I can set my settings how I feel like I want them to be is going to be a good exposed shot and the depth of field that I want. But a lot of times I'm lazy and I just put it on auto. I put the camera at the very edge of a puddle, right? So my camera, sometimes the lens hood gets wet. Sometimes the bottom of the camera gets a little wet. Never deep water, it's not a waterproof camera. But if you put it at the very edge and down level on the ground, because if you're up here, you create a different image, right? You have a different perspective that you're going to see. If you're straight flat, you get way more of the puddle, and it could make this little puddle look huge. But this is under the L tracks on Van Buren Street in Chicago. It's just another way, and I said this before, to add interest, add depth, add layers. What's going on here? Reflections are amazing for that. If you find a spot that's kind of like, I don't know, you're just not feeling it, look for some water. Look for the top of I have an image that I took that I joke about it, and I know people thought I was crazy when I was doing it, but I was taking a photo of the top of a garbage can. There was a street lamp post, but on the other side of it, kind of a ways, a little bit, close enough that the lamp was reflected into the top of the garbage can, and the lamp had Christmas white lights on it. And whatever was on top of the garbage can or the shape of it or whatever it was, it made these white squiggly lines, kind of. It reminded me of a rocket taking off. That's what it kind of looked like. And it just became this magical piece of, I don't know what, a magical lamppost, but it was just one of those odd things that most people probably wouldn't even notice. So look around. It could be anything. The top of my desk, the top of your phone. People make reflection images using their phone or their iPad as the surface to reflect on. I just happen to, use what I can find available to me wherever I'm at. Adding the human element is also important sometimes. I think it's overdone in some cases, but that's my personal opinion. I tend to not have people in my images. I get it. I understand. Having a person there adds scale. This is the Milwaukee Art Museum. Very cool. Again, very cool place. If you ever get a chance to go, tons of opportunities to take photos. No tripods, but it's just a really unique building by Santiago Calatrava. Again, here shows scale, right? The photographer's taking a photo up at this building. So when it works, when you feel it contributes to the image, then add the person. I mean, don't go out of your way to not take people in images. When you're in a city, it's kind of hard not to. This place, this image would be okay. It would be a little kind of an optical illusion kind of thing if there weren't people in it. But that girl with her red hair, oh my God, that was it for me. I was like, woo, she's in the photo, because she makes this shot. The guy sitting there, I don't know. I could take him or leave him. I don't have the skills to remove him, so I just leave him there. He doesn't bother me. And he kind of adds to the steps. Like there's kind of a step feel to the image anyway. So it's her and then him. It kind of adds to that a little bit. But they add scale, and then that pop of color here, especially in this image with the gray granite. So there's a time and place for people in your architectural shots, unless that's what you do. If you like people in your images, then you do that. Just make sure they're there for a reason. Or you can't not have them in there because of where you are, like the Bean, there's always people at the Bean. This is the staircase in the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra. They added a new section attached to the Warner Theater up there where they are housed. Another amazing place, very Art Deco, beautiful theater. And then the attachment, the building they added on, is all very modern, and it has this 2-story staircase, which I was like drooling over from the window outside. And it happened to be during a weekend that they had open doors, which is where you can go into buildings that you normally wouldn't have access to. It was towards the end of the day, so I went in and I took a whole bunch of images of this from up, from down, from level, from on the stairs, every way I could. And then I started walking around, and I was being patient, and I pointed my camera straight down over the railing, and This woman appealed to me where she was in the frame and her hand on the rail, and just that worked for me. There were other people came up and down, it just didn't work. She just worked because of her placement. So be aware of those things also. This particular image I took into texture effects, topaz texture effects, and added a little, magic, little colors. It felt like it needed something else. So that's what I did with that. And that's where the purple and greenish comes from there. This is something I was talking about before, the bean. There's always people at the bean. There's not a lot you can do about it unless you get there at like 3 a.m., and then it's dark. So you're not going to get the same kind of thing. This is another really good example of putting your camera down first. Hang out here for a while. Spend 20 to 30 minutes just sitting in one spot here and watching what people do. Watching them interact with the bean. Look at where your light is coming from. Look at what else is going around, walk around, see what else is happening. Is there anything interesting? A lot of times you'll find people getting their wedding pictures here or quinceañeras, and there's, just different images that you can create at the bean, because the bean is probably the most photographed thing in Chicago. And my biggest challenge now when I go there is, what can I create that's different, that has not been created before? And it's tough. But you push yourself, right? It helps you get better. This particular scene, I was like floored. I was standing there, and then she comes walking up, this girl. This is not set up. I have no idea who she is. Just got lucky. The light on her and her long shadow is the reason I took the photo. Caught my eye. Perfect. I'm like, ooh, awesome, And then I get home and upload it, and I thought, well, this is really strange. There's shadows coming in two directions here in this shot, which is not normal. So then you're like, okay, because there's a huge reflection off the building in the back, creating another light source. These are the things that you start noticing when you put your camera down and when you walk around and look at where things are and where the shadows are and where the lights are and what shapes are created. But you're paying more attention and slowing down to what it is you're looking for. Architecture is everywhere. And I said that before, and I'll probably keep saying it, because I had somebody in one of my mentorship courses one time who lives in a rural place, and he kept insisting there was nowhere to shoot architecture where he lived. The funny thing is, he's now selling prints and photos of things like barns and old structures and brick buildings in some of the small towns where he lives. Funny that it's everywhere, right? We have buildings everywhere. We have bridges everywhere. Structure. This shot is in Butte, North Dakota. Population maybe 50. I'm not even sure anymore. I have no idea. I haven't looked lately, but it's where my parents grew up. It's the VFW building or something like that. And I happened to look up, and I saw the interaction with the building in the clouds, and I thought it worked really well. Small town. Seriously, there's like nothing in the town. The VFW building that houses a little bitty grocery store, insurance office, post office. The school is closed in this town. It's like there's nothing there. Again, architecture is everywhere. This is an old family farm property outside of the small town of Butte. Structure, lines, shapes, colors, architecture. It's got character. Some of the modern buildings are interesting and all, but they don't have character. Tell the story of the building. This is a corn crib somewhere outside of Bloomington. I don't remember where exactly. I think this was 10 years ago. A friend of mine and I, he said he kept wanting to check this place out because he shoots portraits and he thought it would be really cool. We walked in and we're like, whoa, look at that. Oh my gosh. Obviously we're there right time day, right weather to get the lighting that we did. Again, it's a corn crib. It's very architectural, just not something that our minds think about, right? We tend to think about modern and new and city and shiny, but there's plenty of it everywhere. again, I was driving from Brownsville, Texas to Austin, Texas. It was an overnight trip, just one night. And as I was driving up to Austin, on the other side of the highway, I look over and I see this theater and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to turn around. And I'm like, ooh, I don't really have time to turn around. I'm stopping on the way back. So I did. I stopped. I pulled over. I stopped. This whole block was kind of abandoned. I think I don't remember if the other two buildings were completely abandoned, but it's still architecture and it's history. You're recording historical information by taking these photos. Um, it's just it's an interesting place. And that's another way to look at this too. Some of the architecture isn't going to be around anymore. So record that history, record those stories, and stop if you find something interesting. Architecture is no different than anything else. No matter, the time of day and the weather changes everything. Get a totally different feel, totally different look. So even if it's raining, even if it's foggy, snowy, whatever it is, you can still go take architectural shots. There's still art there. Sometimes the snow adds to the interest. It makes another story out of the architecture. It adds interesting shapes and colors sometimes. Shooting at night. I don't do a lot of shooting at night anywhere really anymore. Particularly the city is a little iffy sometimes. So, especially by yourself. But a little bit of a long exposure to smooth out the river, and you get the lights and the shapes come through at night like this, and it's a completely different look and feel than it is during the day. So change up when you go and what you're looking at with the weather and the light. This is a concert house in Berlin. Again, this looks totally different during the day. It's still beautiful. It's still an amazing building. And you could still take architectural shots of the details, the columns, the whole structure, the shapes of the windows, the patterns. But look at night, completely different feel. The light in the windows all lit up, and the carpet and the red lights that light everything up. It just is another way of seeing this building in a different way. Something else you can do for alternative ways of seeing architecture. And I've been playing with this a lot more and more lately because I'm finding it fun and interesting. Different techniques. This would have been a little bit of in-camera motion. So I had my camera and adjusted the shutter speed so that I knew that I would get blur in my shot when I move my camera. This is the Thompson Government Center. Used to be. It's owned by Google now. So I don't know what'll happen to it, but it's a very interesting building by Helmut Jahn. Very controversial building. People hate it. Whatever. I don't know what Google's going to do with it. Hopefully they still let people in to photograph it. Somehow I have a feeling that's not going to happen. But play. Use your camera as a toy. This is a panning method. The sculpture is kind of an infinite stairway. And it's in a courtyard where this orange building, which you see on the right and left, or the right and towards the middle, is. So the color from the building comes through into the structure because I just panned and I knew, it was bright out. It's going to be a little overexposed, but that's okay. It makes it different, makes it a unique way to photograph architecture. This is multiple exposures, in-camera multiple exposures. Most cameras these days have settings, so you can set inside your camera. You can say, I want to shoot 5 photos or six exposures, 9 exposures, whatever the number is. The one on the right the one on the left is probably a 5 exposure, and the one on the left might be 7. I find doing too many gets too messy. There's different ways of looking at this. I tend to look at everything I do as just playing and asking the question, what happens if? What if I do this? What if I try that? You find that you can create some really interesting things that way. But take an exposure, move the camera, take an exposure, move the camera. You can be very deliberate about that, as I was in each of these. In some of these I've just kind of randomly moved the camera in between exposures to see what I get. The one on the right, I've mostly kept uh, my lens, what is it called? you know, focused on the center of that, whatever that design was on the side of a building. And then I took an exposure turn, took an exposure turn, took an exposure turn, and I rotated my camera after each exposure. And that's how I got that kind of eye-ish effect. So play. Again, some of the cameras do really cool things. Mine doesn't. It's 10 years old. I'm probably lucky that it has in camera multiple exposures, to be honest. And Lori asked me to talk about black and white versus color in architecture. This is something that I think, and I think it's true of most photography, no matter what your subject is, that you kind of get a feel for how you're going to process something when you're shooting it. You can walk up to a scene when you practice. This just takes practice and doing it, a lot. You get a feel for what's going to happen, right? This is going to look good in black and white, or this isn't going to work in black and white. So you compose your shot, you make your shot, but in your head you already are processing it. I think it just depends on what you're doing. Here's the front of the Union Station. The image on the right, like, all this is about is those shadows. It was just the perfect time of day. The sun was perfect. It made these huge giant shadows. And I knew this was going to be a black and white shot, because in the shot on the left, there's an orange construction sign just past the edge of that doorway, which is distracting. Even the light of the globes on the wall is a little bit distracting, because I kind of want to look up there instead of at the shadows and the columns, which is what in my mind is the subject of this shot. The man standing next to the garbage can, I kind of wish he wasn't there. In the color version, he really bothers me. But in the black and white, I upped the contrast and converted it to black and white. And now he doesn't quite stand out so much anymore with the garbage can. He kind of looks like he belongs there. Sort of fits in a little bit better. You don't see the orange sign anymore. It's not distracting. The globes, you see, all you're kind of focused on now are the shapes, the lines, the shadows. So I think an image dictates to you and tells you what to do with it. This needs to be black and white. It'll work better. This building, people shoot all the time. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody process this building in color, because it lends itself to this really high contrast black and white. It just does. I might have to go back and see if I have some of this building and see what happens with color. But black and white also removes the distractions. It removes some of the things that you don't want to see sometimes. This is the inside of that Thompson Center that I was showing you that I had the intentional camera movement in. For me, it works both ways, because I know the story. I know that people hate this building. I know they hate the color of the building is a huge, huge thing over the years. It's like this salmon-y, orangey color with blue, teal, blue, aqua, whatever it is. And people hate it. Quite controversial, So the color works because of that. It works because of the shapes. This is also an example of using something as a reflection. There's an information kiosk, I don't know, maybe 3 foot, 2.5 feet, 3 foot, that gives you all the numbers of offices and businesses that are in the building, what floor they're on and all that. I put my camera on top of the kiosk. So while these look like 4 images, it's 2 images and it's just the reflection. But I put my camera on this kiosk, which was angled slightly, 30 degrees maybe or so, to see what I could see that way. What comes out? Where can I put my camera that's going to create an interesting composition by resting it on this surface? The black and white here, I think, works because of the billions of lines in it and the shapes that there are. It kind of is messy, but I kind of like it. The building is messy. In this case, this is an apartment building in Longyearbyen, which is in Svalbard, which is a archipelago north of Norway. Somewhere I had absolutely no clue that I would have found interesting architecture in. Um, when I first walked up to this is the back of the building. Those orange doors popped and caught my eye against this gray building and the spiral staircase, because I will never not, I will not never take, I will not never take a picture of a spiral staircase, something like that. um, it just is interesting. And I thought that it was interesting with the lower part of the building cutting off part. I think it was the garage maybe in front of the back of the building there that cut the other staircase off. The one in the middle though, so that was about the doors and the orange and the stair and the, shapes and the color. The one in the middle is all about that staircase and looking up and a different perspective. So if I had left this in color, those orange doors would have completely distracted from what I wanted. It would have completely distracted from the shape of the stairs. The one on the right, again, this is kind of it tells the whole story of the spiral staircase and the orange doors. And it works together because you kind of follow both the stairs and the doors up into the image. So I think it just depends on what you feel. What does this look like to you? For example, this image, I knew when I took it, it was going to be a very graphic, high contrast black and white. It just lended itself to that. Post-processing is another way to make your images unique and to bring out the art in them. You might not consider this architectural. It is in a very basic way, stairs, building, I could not delete this image. I love that tree there. And I was like, there's something, I got to be able to do something with this. Again, I'm not a huge post-processor. A lot of what I do is hit presets, see what happens, try this, move that, slide this, what happens if I do that. I started playing around with texture effects, Topaz texture effects, and clicked on this one particular preset, took some of it away, put some of it back, played around with it, and ended up with the image on the right. This is what that felt like to me when I was there. It was hot out. It was warm out that day. So it needed to be warmer as an image. It needed to be grittier, and the character needed to be pulled out of it. And that's what that did to me. It also needed to be, the perspective needed to be fixed to get it to feel like I wanted it to feel. A lot of architecture is amazing to play with. This is the Aqua building, which is by Jean and Gang again, that building with the curved balconies from before. It works in so many ways. It works in color, this building too, a lot of times, if the light is right, because you get the windows are a greenish blue color, but you can make them soft and dreamy. You can make them hard and harsh. But it helps you tell the story and how you saw what it was you were photographing. It's just seeing, at least the photography I care about. You either see it or you don't. The rest is academic, right? We can all learn how to process the images. It's how you organize what you see into the picture that is important. It's what distinguishes your work from everybody else's. It's how you see the subject and how you can portray and share that and get that feeling across to the person viewing it. If you guys have questions, I know I'm not there, obviously, to answer them. You can email me at Lori@LoriNovak.com, LAURI@LAURINOVAK.com. I'm happy to answer questions. I know that's not the best thing to do when you're doing a presentation, but that's unfortunately, we can't all be everywhere that we want to be when we want to be. So, but I'm always happy to answer questions. I have a tour coming up in the fall, September 28th through October 1st. It's 4 days. If you use the code C100, it's $100 off. It's 4 days. There's other tours within the tour that I sign us up for that are involved. Architectural boat tour, the Rookery building that I was telling you about, the Navy Pier, Ferris wheel. Unless you're afraid of heights, then that's not necessarily a good idea. But it's usually a lot of fun. I'm very relaxed during the tours. I don't bring my own camera. Last time I did this, I brought my husband's point and shoot Lumix. Had a blast with that, but it allows me to show you and help you find compositions and help you find subjects and things to see that you might not notice or find on your own, because it's a lot to look at when you're there. This is my contact information. My social media is almost all Lori Novak Photo. I do mentoring, photo tours. I sell fine art. I sell commercial. Got any questions? Let me know. I hope you got something out of this and appreciated it, and that you all learned something, because that's what I'm here for. Thank you very much. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to exit out of that. And I think I'm still recording. So that's it. Thank you guys again for having me. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you in the fall.